Yo, what's shaking? There is no time for dinner and no time for shopping at the store or whatever Jason Sukumel is currently doing right now in his car. We've got breaking news here on the Orangebloods Texas Football Channel. Anthony Hill, five-star linebacker from Denton Ryan, a guy that, boy, I feel like we've been writing about for pretty much this entire decade so far, has announced his commitment to the University of Texas. It's a big, big deal if Arch Manning is the guy that is the foundational piece of this recruiting class on the offensive side of the ball. Anthony Hill is that guy on the defensive side of the ball. I'm Jeff Ketchum. That's Jason Sukumel. Do us a solid. Like this video. Subscribe to the channel. Appreciate the fact that share this video. It's a big deal, Jason. The Longhorns have landed. You take Arch Manning out of the equation because he's his own unique guy. This is the most important commitment of this 2022 recruiting class. It signifies a lot for this Texas coaching staff, for the defense as soon as next season, for a lot of things.
Yeah. Note to self, get one of those phone holders for my car because I'm sitting in my truck in an academy parking lot in Georgetown, Texas, while my daughter's in gymnastics practice. So that's how big a deal this is. I pulled off to the side of the road. I'm like, all right, we're going to write this story, get the story posted, do this video. But just a huge deal, Catch. You said it, man. I feel like we've been covering Anthony Hill forever. He commits to A&M. I posted my commitment story 5 minutes ago. I wrote that commitment story on November 11th. And honestly, I'd forgotten I had written it. I had to go back through all my stories, and I found it in there and was able to post it. But you kind of what you said echoes exactly what I wrote in my commitment story. I said, this is one of the biggest moments, really not just for Texas, but in the whole nationally in this recruiting cycle. Arch Manning is number one. Okay, that's the big story of this cycle. But Anthony Hill landing a five-star linebacker, a need position for Texas, is obviously a huge story in itself. Getting him after he was once committed to Texas A&M makes it an even sexier story for Texas fans. And it's kind of like I said with Colton Vasek when he flipped from Oklahoma. I said, for a Texas fan, right? Isn't it better to get Anthony Hill this way? Because now you get to it really stings A&M even worse than it would have been just like Colton Vasek flipping from Oklahoma. I mean, listen, it's just a huge, huge evening on a Thursday night. Texas probably still having their in-home visit with Anthony Hill, I would guess, as you and I sit here and talk. So huge night for Texas. The visit went well. I gotta assume the Hills had this kind of plan down. It was all by design that he was going to go ahead and announce his commitment during or maybe shortly after the in-home visit. So all went according to their plan, I think. But just a huge development for Texas. A guy that I think most of us feel comes in maybe as a day one starter, but I think almost certainly as a day one contributor for Texas.
Yeah, I mean, in a normal year, you might think day one contributor, but when you look at the depth chart, you look at the Texas Longhorns expected to lose 5 of their 6 top contributors at the linebacker position. Overshone gone, Tucker Dorsey gone, all of the depth behind the starters for the most part gone. You're expecting to bring, Jalen Ford back, but beyond that, you don't know what you even have. It would be, I think, a disappointment if Anthony Hill doesn't come in, start right away. I mean, it's funny. I was looking at his rankings. Rivals has Anthony Hill ranked higher than anybody.
Yes, let's say that again. Say it again, Catch, because we get so much.
For all of you that have been upset because Cedric Baxter has been lowest for the most part, I think Rivals has had him lowest among all of the major services.
Yeah.
Texas, well, not anymore because they got him like 32 in the country.
Yeah.
And I always say the only thing that matters is the final ranking. When by the way, it's a big recruit when the sex bots come into the chat. Find your love in the city. Let me get rid of the bots real quick. Because they were there fast. I think I've got the bots taken care of, but it's hard to know completely. So Rivals has him 5 stars, 15th in the country. 24/7 has him 5 stars, number 22 in the country. ESPN has him 5 stars, number 18 in the country. The only outlier on 3 has him as a mid 4-star, 62 in the country. Don't really get that one, but sometimes, hey, it happens. I love Anthony Hill, Jason. I have from the very first moment. I laid eyes on him when he was a young player on that Denton Ryan defense. He's played in big games. He knows what he's a winner. He is at 6'2", 228, really athletic, but like Colton Vasek, wildly physical. And at the impact, when he arrives at the football, things happen. Balls come out. People go down. Like, he is a big playmaker. They move him all over the field for Denton Ryan. He's a guy that is kind of a traditional inside guy, but they will play him off the edge. You'll see them use him. I mean, they know what they have at Denton Ryan and Anthony Hill, which is kind of like a destructive linebacker. And they don't use him in just one spot. They use him everywhere. And it shows on the field. And one of the things I posted in my instant analysis article of his over at orangebloods.com. And by the way, we've already got tons of Anthony Hill content. Just go to the front page and check it out. It's all there. I've got 6, like his non-district games from his senior season. And even as a senior, you can see the improvement. You can see the explosiveness as a player. This is one of these guys that if he stays healthy, right, there's the Mount Rushmore of things that can sidetrack a guy. Guys can get into trouble. They can get hurt. They can get into issues off the field with regards to the law and stuff like that. If this guy can just avoid these pratfalls that can snap guys up, this is a guy for me that's playing on Sundays in the future. And it's the reason why we do a breaking news, commitment video of him right now. You're in your car. I'm in the middle of eating dinner and working on the war room. And it was like, no doubt about it. You have to can't make a big enough deal out of this. I was looking it up. He's only the 6th linebacker since 2002 with Rivals that's been rated as a 5-star.
Wow.
60% of those. So 3 of the 5 that were named as 5 stars not only got drafted in the NFL, none lower than the 3rd round in the NFL. Talking about Sergio Kindle for the Longhorns back in the day, 2nd round pick, who I think would have had a sensational NFL career had he not, gotten sucked up by one of those things. Yeah, I talked about those injury things. Malik Jefferson, obviously Longhorn fans know him well, and Baron Browning. Ironically, the only linebacker of those 5 previous 5-star linebackers from Texas, Texas had one of the guys that didn't pan out, and that was Eric Fowler.
And he was a late movement to 5-star territory, and that was a singular person made that call. But that was even kind of an outlier in terms of how he got to that 5-star rank.
Well, and if you go back one more year, just add the 2001 guys, and Rivals did exist back in, trust me, I worked there back in 2001. Derek Johnson was a 5-star linebacker. So really, if we're talking about 5-star linebackers, Derek Johnson, Malik Jefferson, Sergio Kindle, all of those guys, All-Americans, all of those guys, NFL players, although Malik and Sergio obviously with careers that didn't exactly go the way they wanted to. But as college players, all difference makers, some more so than others. But this is a big deal. And ironically, there have been the other 2 5-star linebackers. I guess there are a couple of active ones. Marcel Brooks, who was at LSU and transferred to TCU, and has been an okay college player. I think they still expect big things from Marcel Brooks before his career is over at TCU. And Clayton Smith, who ironically just went into the portal for Oklahoma, and it remains to be seen what happens with him. So obviously not a surefire thing, but 5 stars in general, better than 50% typically pan out at really high levels. And it's about as sure of a thing as you get in the world of high school football recruiting is a player like this with his bona fides, his credentials as a high school player going to the next level. And again, it can't be stressed enough. The importance of this for Texas, Jason, there's a real need on the field, but he represents something in the state of Texas in recruiting this year. The Longhorns needed to get some of these guys, that top 5 guys in the state. You know, they've got Malik Muhammad, they've got Jonte Cook, but this is another kind of exclamation mark on what they've been able to do so far in state as a recruiting, you know, a major influence and force in the state of recruiting. You have to be able to kind of call yourself that. You have to get guys like this. And again, outside of Manning, we're probably talking about the most important guy in this class.
Yeah, I mean, these are if you want to compete for championships, I mean, listen, these are the guys that the Georgias and the Ohio States and Alabamas, they get 2 or 3 of these guys every year. I mean, Texas has recruited well. They recruited well under Tom Herman. They recruited well under Charlie Strong, but they didn't always get the true, you know, you don't want to say a can't miss prospect, but Anthony Hill's pretty darn close to that. You know, there are pitfalls that can catch up to any player catch. You mentioned it, but one thing I love about Anthony Hill, I mean, you can see it in the tape. He's a tremendous player. He's athletic. He's what I call a heavy hitter. Man, when he hits you, you're going down. I mean, he's not a guy that's going to drag you to the ground. He's going to knock you over and stop you dead in your tracks. But he's also a kid who works hard to maximize his talent. He's a high character kid. Doesn't say a whole lot, but he's a high character kid. Works his tail off. Comes from a really good family. I mean, those pitfalls that you mentioned, I don't see any of those trapping up Anthony Hill. I mean, you know, am I guaranteeing he's going to come in and be a guy that, you know, 4 years from now is an NFL draft pick? No, I mean, you can't do that. But I'll be shocked if he's not an ultra productive player for Texas. You know, I don't want to say the next Derek Johnson. That's a ridiculously high bar to set. But I mean, he has that kind of potential, man. I mean, now will he reach that? That's next to impossible, but he has that kind of upside to him if everything goes well, that he could be that kind of player for Texas over the course of his career. Just love everything about this pickup on the field. Really like the kid off the field. You guys have heard me talk about his family. I mean, I love it. His dad's amazing. Just, they're no bullshit people. They're just guys. They just want to get the job done. Anthony's going to work hard to maximize his talent. He's going to stay away from some of the distractions. So there's nothing to dislike about this pickup for Texas.
A few super chat questions, and then Jason, we'll maybe think about wrapping this thing up since you are sitting in your truck right now. And
sorry, my phone. My arm's about to fall asleep.
It just cracked me up a little bit. Tom G says, "What up, Jason? Super pickup for us. Do we flip him if the Ags don't suck this year?"
I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
Although, yeah, I talked to Jason Howell, who's with Tex Ags, used to work with us, Catch. I mean, he and I still talk to a lot of former Rivals guys, and, you know, we kind of pick each other's brains. He did talk to someone right after Anthony decommitted and had a kind of off the record conversation with him. I think it's okay for me to say this. It wasn't just about wins and losses, but to answer Tom's question, I think that probably pushed them over the hump for Anthony to decommit. So I don't think Texas flips him if A&M doesn't stink it up this year, but it wasn't only about wins and losses.
I think it was about the culture of the A&M program and kind of, you know, we've seen, I think 25 guys have entered the portal so far in the last couple of weeks. Guys are getting suspended. There's a lot of things going on. It's important to say that when he originally, and we've talked about this a lot, when Anthony Hill first committed to A&M, that was his choice. I had been hearing really for months now that his parents are very open about the idea of Texas, maybe even preferred Texas, but they weren't going to impose their will on Anthony. They're going to let him pick where he wanted to go to school. And when he made his decision earlier in the summer, that's because he wanted to go to Texas A&M. A lot happened between the time that he committed. Weirdly, kind of the same thing with Colton Vasek. Maybe slightly different, but both of those guys commit in the summer, and then a little bit of buyer's remorse. And I think the program's losing that they were committed to, and less so with Venables in Oklahoma, where I think what inspired Anthony Hill was probably a little more his perception of what was going on at Texas A&M that really opened the door. But yeah, I mean, and ironically, I guess Eric Fowler is technically the last 5-star linebacker that Texas landed. The last consensus five-star linebacker that because Eric Fowler wasn't a 5-star for everybody.
Right.
Malik Jefferson was. And ironically, Texas kind of was the recipient of some good luck.
That's right.
With Texas A&M in order to get Malik Jefferson back in the day. That they didn't have a defensive coordinator. Kevin Sumlin mismanaged the handling of the Jefferson recruitment, but just didn't quite. He fumbled that, and Texas was able to scoop up the ball and ultimately, claim him. And sometimes that's the way it goes. Every recruitment is a snowflake, but ironically, 2 of the last 3 rivals 5-star linebackers that Texas would have landed, 2 of them are specifically because Texas A&M kind of fumbled it, no matter what the circumstances were like. In both of those situations, if A&M's able to handle the recruitment and elements of it better than they did, it probably turns out different. Eric Torres asks in the super chat, is this a bigger get than when Texas landed Jefferson?
Let me answer that 2 ways, Eric. I think Anthony Hill's a better player than Malik Jefferson. And listen, we all love Malik Jefferson. He's an amazing person and great personality and just a super cool guy. But I never thought he was a great linebacker, even at Texas. I mean, I thought he's a really good one, but I didn't think he was great. I think Anthony Hill has a chance to be great. Is this a bigger moment, though? I don't know, man. That Malik deal was pretty big when he announced, and just the drum up to that and the suspense leading up to that. And there was a lot of hoop and hypla, a lot of hype going into that thing and hoopla. This one just kind of came out of the blue. I think it's a bigger pickup for Texas, but I don't know if it's a bigger moment. When Malik made his announcement, at a press conference, that was a pretty big deal.
I 100% agree with you. I would add, though, that I think the actual football need is bigger now.
Absolutely.
That's not to say that when Charlie Strong picked up Malik that wasn't big for the program, but if there's a universe out there right now where if he goes back to A&M, Texas has some real questions and holes in this defense going to next year. And one of the things about this addition is that it does seem like the coaches have set this thing up so that you couldn't have a clearer path to playing time with the departure of DeMarvion Overshown to the NFL. Anthony Hill becomes a really important player immediately for Texas. I mean, if he's not ready, it's problematic for this defense. Consequently, if he comes in and is ready, we may be talking about a guy next year that is up for Defensive Newcomer of the Year honors in the Big 12. I mean, the sky is really the limit. He's going to be given a big role, and it's always tough to expect a young guy to come in and take that ball and run with it right. Can he be the Kelvin Banks next year at linebacker the way Kelvin Banks was at left tackle? I think that's what they're hoping for, but boy, it's hard to automatically project that right away. It says a lot about how talented he is.
Him coming in January will be a big help for him, obviously. I mean, he'll get.
You remember when I asked you that question in Slack? That was like the big one I had. It was like months ago. You probably don't, but I was like, hey, Anthony Hill's a midterm guy.
Yeah,
right?
I do remember that. Yeah.
And the implications of that really are crucial for Texas, because I'll point to DJ Campbell this year not coming in early. Look, don't begrudge the kid for finishing his high school year, but when it comes to making early impacts right away, if you want to play as a true freshman, the best way to do so is to come in early. And I think with all of the expectations that are going to be on Anthony Hill, he will know, like, he's going to come in and the spotlight's going to be really bright on him. Him coming in as an early enrollee in January, I think really helps his cause. Because if he stumbles and struggles a little bit early out of the gate, in the spring. He's essentially got 30 practices plus a full off season in the Texas strength and conditioning program to prepare himself for September. And that's really important, I think, for what they're going to ask of him in that first season. Did you have anything else as a follow-up?
No, go ahead, sir.
One more super chat question, and then we'll wrap this bad boy up. What remaining player, this one comes from Rich, what remaining player is still out there that could really rock our worlds, especially now that we have Ant committed?
Good question. I'm looking kind of at my war room stuff tonight. They could certainly use another cornerback. They got a kid, Tyler Scott, coming in this weekend. He just visited USC last weekend. He visited Alabama the weekend before that. Gavin Holmes was the portal player coming in, but a guy like Deuce Robinson at tight end, but that seems like an extreme long shot. I mean, I don't want to say it's all downhill after Anthony Hill, but he sets a.
It might come down to how much you like DeAndre Moore as a prospect.
DeAndre Moore, Texas, obviously very much in the mix there. Check out the war room tonight, but Louisville's. I didn't realize he has 3 teammates from Bosco that are committed to Louisville. His brother goes to Louisville, but they do need another wide receiver. So DeAndre Moore would be big. But there's nobody that moves the needle anywhere near the way Anthony Hill did tonight. So
Deuce Robinson would probably, if Texas was at the top of that, and we were talking about guys still out there that they could land, he'd be a really big deal. But there aren't. It speaks to how important and big of a prospect Anthony Hill is that he's in his own orbit, like there's his own solar system as a prospect, and there's really nobody else that quite compares to that. Tom G with one last super chat question, and it's a good one. How does Hill compare to Perkins? Who is the better prospect? Let me go first on this one, Jason.
Yeah. Yep.
Hill's not as athletic as Perkins.
Right.
Perkins could legitimately, I thought, have been the best running back prospect in the state last year if he's very DJ Williams-ish for me coming out of high school, and that he could have played either side of the ball and I think been a big-time college player. I don't think he's as physically – he's not as physically dominant as Anthony. Anthony Hill is a monster physically, 6'2", 228. Only 2 linebackers in the history of the Rivals rankings from the state of Texas who've been, I think, either 3 or 4 stars, Jason, or 5 stars, have weighed more than 220 pounds and gone on to be successes at the next level. I got a list of about 40 linebackers who all had various rankings. And ironically, the 2 guys that were 220 plus coming out of high school were Baron Browning and Sergio Kendall. So the guys that weirdly have these big frames, they're kind of freaks. Anthony Hill's a freak. He's just a different kind of freak than Harold Perkins. I kind of have them rated the same as prospects coming out. I didn't have Harold Perkins as like the number 1 guy in the state. I had him as a true 5-star prospect. Same way I feel about Anthony Hill. I don't know that I personally think of either guy, one of the 2 being a better prospect. They're just in a pile for me of kind of the same.
They're really close, but if I had to pick one, I would probably, and it's not what Tom G's going on here, but I'd probably go Perkins. That dude could take over a game at the high school level, unlike really any player I can remember in a while. And we saw him do it at LSU already. So I'd probably favor Perkins.
It helps that he was a total badass this year on the field, and
exactly.
It's hard to eliminate the production that he's already produced.
Getting like 4 sacks in a game and crazy stuff. He's just so freakishly athletic, and I will always lean towards speed and athleticism. So I would probably go Perkins. But I mean, we're splitting hairs there. I mean, they are 1A and 1A. I would say.
Yeah, the difference again. There was some thought that Perkins might even be a little bit of a tweener. between, God, is he too small as a line? The people that didn't like Harold Perkins didn't like him because they thought, well, he's too big to be a DB, really. Not big enough to be a linebacker. And as it turns out, not an issue. Harold Perkins, he's fine. He's fine just the way he is. Nobody would say about Anthony Hill that he's a man child as a linebacker at the high school level, and he'll be just a full-grown man, I think, at the college level. You know, he's going to be a guy that probably it'll be interesting to see how his body, you know, there's a world out there where he gets a little bit bigger and maybe he's an edge player for you. I tend to think of him as a true kind of all-purpose linebacker. I have no issue if you use him in that position, in that capacity, but he's really good between the tackles. He's got great instincts. He knows how to get to the football. I mean, to me, he's a guy that he can be an every down, certainly a first and second down type linebacker. He needs to improve going backwards a little bit, playing in coverage like a lot of high school linebackers. I think he's going to be fantastic. I mean, again, my expectations for Anthony Hill, if he stays healthy, he's going to play on Sundays. So what Texas has added today is a potential Sunday linebacker. And there really have been few times. Jason and I did a video earlier today where we got a bit historic, and we were talking about, you know, going back to 2001 with the Mac Brown era. Really and truly, you can probably count on one hand the number of players in the last 20 years that when Texas landed them at the linebacker position, you felt like just stay healthy and they're NFL linebackers. And you're talking Derek Johnson, you're talking about Jordan Hicks, Malik Jefferson, Sergio Kendall, and probably today, because I don't know that I thought of Eric Fowler ever as – he was always a riskier, highly ranked player. His floor was as low as his ceiling was high. Anthony Hill feels like a guy whose floor is not very low. Like, at worst, he's going to be a pretty good player. At best, I think there's some transcendent ability inside of him that could make him the next Texas All-America linebacker once Jalen Ford departs.
Yeah, I completely agree with that assessment. I mean, his floor, he said it well, his floor is pretty damn high. I mean, even if he comes in and doesn't live up to maybe some of the expectations and some of the hype, I'd be shocked again if he still wasn't a very good player. I mean, his floor is probably as high as most of those guys you just mentioned. Yeah.
Jason, any parting shot, or was that kind of it?
Yeah, I'm looking at the clock. Dude, I got and my arm's about to fall off, so that's my parting shot. I think
somehow we went 30 minutes when we meant to go like 12. Look, guys, like the video, subscribe to the channel, do all of that stuff that we love for you to do. Hey, share this video on social media. It's kind of a big one. You might as well share it so that all your friends and family and loved ones can check out the Anthony Hill conversation. For myself, Jason Sukumel, and Blake, the producer, who was like me, trying to eat some dinner, and then a 5-star commitment happens. Then everything kind of changes from there. All right, guys, have a great weekend. We'll talk to you soon.